Welcome to AmdiVibes, where today we are talking about a mirror, but this is not an ordinary mirror. This is a black mirror carved from obsidian, brought to Europe from the Aztec Empire, and it currently sits in a glass case in the British Museum in London. It's a mirror that a brilliant, deeply serious, and deeply strange Elizabethan scholar named John Dee believed allowed him to communicate with angels. And it's a mirror that, when you understand its full story, who made it, who used it, and what it was originally for, raises questions that neither science nor religion has fully answered. This is the story of John Dee's obsidian mirror. Let's start with the man himself. John Dee, born in London in 1527. By any measure, he was one of the most remarkable minds of the Elizabethan age. A mathematician, astronomer, navigator, and cartographer, he was an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, and was the man who actually coined the term British Empire. He was a scientist so respected that he was consulted on the reform of the Gregorian calendar. His personal library was one of the largest in England, containing more books than Oxford University at the time. This man was not a fool. He was not a madman. He was one of the most educated, most accomplished, most intellectually rigorous people of his era. And he spent the last decades of his life trying to talk to angels. Not metaphorically, not poetically, literally, through a black mirror, in a practice he called scrying. Now, let's talk about the mirror. The obsidian mirror now in the British Museum is about the size of a large dinner plate. It's circular, polished to a deep, reflective black. It was made in Mexico, almost certainly by Aztec craftsmen, sometime before the Spanish conquest in 1519. For the Aztecs, obsidian mirrors were not just decorative objects, they were sacred instruments, associated specifically with Tezcatlipoca, one of the most powerful and feared deities in the Aztec pantheon. Tezcatlipoca translates to the smoking mirror. He was the god of night, of conflict, of the darkness that exists alongside every light. His defining feature was an obsidian mirror that replaced one of his feet, a mirror in which he could see everything: the sins of humanity, the truth behind appearances, the hidden face of reality. When Hernan Cortés arrived in Mexico, the Aztec Emperor Moctezuma reportedly believed, at least at first, that he might be Tezcatlipoca incarnate, the pale stranger from across the water, carrying the smoking mirror of the god. How the specific mirror traveled from Mexico to Europe and into John Dee's hands isn't fully documented, but by the 1580s, it was his. And this, here at AmdiVibes, is where John Dee's story takes its most extraordinary turn. From around 1582, Dee began a series of SANCs, experiments in what he called angelic communication, but he had a problem. He couldn't scry effectively himself. He couldn't see what he needed to see in the mirror. He needed an intermediary. He found one in a man named Edward Kelly. Kelly was younger than Dee, and controversial. His ears had been cropped, a common punishment for forgery. He was not the most obvious choice for a spiritual intermediary, but when Kelly looked into the obsidian mirror, he saw things. He described angels, specific angels with specific names, delivering specific messages in a specific language, a language he called Enochian, the language of the angels. It was a complete, internally consistent language with its own grammar, its own alphabet, and its own rules of syntax. Dee recorded everything Kelly reported, meticulously, in journals that survive to this day and fill multiple volumes. The angels, according to Kelly's visions, delivered elaborate instructions. They described the structure of the universe. They gave tables of correspondences. They spoke about the end of the world and the role Dee would play in events of cosmic significance. And John Dee believed every single word. This brings us to the Enochian question, the part of John Dee's story that researchers still argue about. The Enochian language. Linguists who have studied it say it has properties that are genuinely unusual for a constructed or fabricated language. It has internal consistency. Its grammar doesn't simply mirror English. Its sound patterns appear independent of Kelly's native tongue. If Kelly invented it, he invented it with a sophistication that would be remarkable for a forger with cropped ears living in the 16th century. So, if he didn't invent it, what is it? Researchers have proposed multiple explanations. Perhaps it was a constructed language created through genuine unconscious creativity, a product of Kelly's mind operating in a dissociated state that felt, to both him and Dee, like external communication. Or maybe it was a deliberate, elaborate fraud sustained over years, with Kelly possessing far more linguistic creativity than his reputation suggests. Or, and this is the possibility that refuses to be entirely dismissed, it has something that neither of those explanations fully accounts for. The Enochian system has been used by serious occultists from Dee's time to the present. Aleister Crowley built significant portions of his system on it. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn incorporated it. Modern practitioners of ceremonial magic still use it. Whatever Kelly was seeing in that mirror, it produced something that has outlasted both of them for centuries. And then there's the question that almost nobody asks about John Dee's mirror. What did the Aztecs use it for? Because the Obsidian mirror did not begin its life as a scrying instrument in a Tudor scholarly study. It began as a sacred object in a religious system of extraordinary sophistication, consecrated to the god Tezcatlipoca. It was used in ceremonies whose specific nature we only partially understand, because the Spanish systematically destroyed the records. But what we do know is this: the Aztecs understood obsidian mirrors as instruments for seeing beyond the visible world, for accessing knowledge that ordinary perception cannot reach. And John Dee, with no knowledge of Tezcatlipoca, with no understanding of the object's original purpose, used it for exactly the same thing. Two completely different civilizations, two completely different spiritual traditions, two completely different centuries, the same object, used for the same purpose. The modern separation between science and spiritual experience is a recent invention, and it has costs. It means that experiences like Dee's genuine, documented, reproducible under certain conditions get filed under delusion rather than being investigated. The second lesson is about the objects we inherit without understanding. The obsidian mirror passed from Aztec sacred use to European colonial collection to an Elizabethan scholar's anteroom to a glass case in the British Museum. At each stage, the people who held it understood something about it. And at each stage, they understood something different. Which version is correct? The Aztec priests who consecrated it to Tezcatlipoca, John Dee who used it to speak with angels, the British Museum which catalogs it as a pre-Columbian artifact. Perhaps all three are partial truths about an object whose full nature exceeds any single cultural framework's ability to contain it. And the final lesson is this: John Dee spent the last decades of his life in pursuit of a conversation with something beyond the ordinary world. He used the best instrument available to him. He recorded what he found with extraordinary care. He died largely discredited, his library dispersed, his reputation in ruins. But the Enochian language survived, the journals survived, the mirror survived, and 4 centuries later, we are still asking the questions he was asking. Which means, whatever else he was asking the right questions. Here at AmdiVibes, we tell these stories because the boundary between the known and the unknown is where the most interesting human beings have always lived. If this story gripped you, share it with someone today. Subscribe to AmdiVibes for more stories that live on the edge of what we think we know. We'll see you in the next one.